Hi, Jake. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today on the podcast.
Yeah, of course.
I just want to jump right into it and have you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about you as a maker, as a knitter, as a dyer, and tell us about your yarn business.
Yeah, so I'm Jake, everybody. For those who don't know me, who are kind of coming to the space, I am from Providence, Rhode Island. I run my own hand-dyed yarn business called Kenyarn. It's a play on my last name, which is Kenyon. And yeah, I hand dye yarn, but I also have in the past few years, sort of forayed into designing and then even have done some other stuff for my shop as far as like graphic design and the other little items that are really fun, like notion dishes and acrylic buttons and things like that. So yeah, I do a lot of stuff within the space, but
Yeah.
I'm yarn obsessed. But I was a crocheter first in grad school.
Hmm.
I picked sort of that up, and for anybody who's ever been to grad school, why I picked up crochet in grad school.
Best
But
dress.
yeah, and then I started, after I left grad school, I started working full time as a speech pathologist,
Mhm.
and I started seeing people dyeing yarn online, and I sort of said like, oh, I bet I could do that too. And then I sort of just fell in love with the process, and then only after I started dyeing yarn did I learn to knit. Yeah. Um,
Would you say that you have a favorite of one craft over the other? Are you still
oh,
diehard crochet or
I know, and both sides will come from my blood if I reveal it. But
exactly?
you know what? I think that for me, crocheting is more meditative, while
Mm,
knitting is more um I don't know. I don't want to use the word rewarding, but I feel like every time I knit something, it like perhaps feels like a little bit like more challenging, or like
right.
I don't know. If there's something about knitting, I think I would have to say knitting. Like if you really if you really made me answer, I'd
Bless
probably
you.
say knitting. But
Yeah,
I will always like love crochet for a lot of reasons. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely. Yeah.
I love the simplicity. I love the the speed. Like, oh my God, you can freaking crochet something in like a day, whereas knitting takes like 75 years. So yeah, I'm actually hosting my first crochet along right now. And
I
that's been
love
such a
it.
fun experience because we just picked like a really, really easy pattern, and
Okay.
everybody was on board. Like when it came to like reasons why people were joining the Cal, like I was very upfront. I was like, I just want to hang out with y'all and like literally like crochet a granny square. And
Yeah.
it's like an
Yes.
enormous crochet granny square
Oh my
blanket
gosh.
that I'm
I
working on.
love that.
Yeah, so
Oh
I'm
my goodness. I love
I'm so
order.
behind. All of my participants are like cruising. So this week I'm like definitely like trying to bust through a
Yeah.
good portion of the blanket.
Oh my gosh. So is that's the size of one square? I love that.
Well, so it's actually just an infinity square. Like you can
Oh
make it as
yeah.
big as a blanket will go.
Oh, I love that.
But yeah, we ended up, because you know me, I love to use two strands of yarn. Like I love
Yes.
holding yarn double. So
Yeah.
everybody got 12 skeins of fingering yarn, and we're doing
Okay.
it held double. And some of the blankets that the people are making are so gorgeous.
Oh my
I'm like,
gosh.
yo,
Yeah.
like you outdid me like so hard. I'm like, so I'm this weekend I'm
Where are
planning.
you guys sharing? Are you like doing like a Zoom group or like are you hashtagging on Ravelry? Like where are you guys sharing your work?
So when I do a cal, I pretty much encourage people with like sort of like, they're not mandatory, but they're like optional like hashtag prompts. And then we
Okay.
make a hashtag for the crochet along, you know, but we do a beginning, a middle, and an end checkpoint for like
Love it.
checking in. And we do like an hour long, like private Google Meets chat. And then
Mhm.
we actually, this for the first time, we actually integrated using Discord. Um,
Oh, yes. Yes.
yeah,
Love
and
that.
I'm like obsessed with it for crochet alongs because it feels like we get to hang out more than just those like you know, because like when we're working on a blanket, we'll send a pic to the group chat on Discord and like,
I
you know,
love
and we can talk about other stuff. And like with Discord, like if somebody wants to start a channel about like, you know, yarn substitutions, like we can start a channel
that.
for that. Or like if someone wants to do something for, you know, it's just a really cool
Yeah.
platform when it comes to
Yeah.
knit alongs and crochet alongs.
I love that. I love Discord. I got into Discord through gaming.
Yeah.
So my friends and I had like a gamer thread, and I know a lot of people who are big into anime, but I've really seen the platform expand for all different type of industries. Like I said, it's really that way of where you can have like that live network community feel, and people can ask questions. So yeah, I love
Yeah. And I just made a channel that I'm the host of that's for like, you know, LGBTQ plus makers. So like if you identify
that.
within that sphere, I actually just put you can DM me for the link and like I just add you and we have like, you know, we have different channels for all sorts of stuff. Like we have a
Love
TV
that.
shows one, a book recommendations one, you know,
Yeah.
an advocacy one, like making people aware of certain causes that to support. Like, so so I think it's a cool platform.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that of, it seems like you're very, very passionate about community and engagement, and not just, hey guys, you know, here's some yarn skeins, here's a pattern. Can you talk about like how that started and how you really integrated that into your business and your brand, where it's also really about like knowing your audience and why that's important to you, and why you feel like it would be important for other people who are running their small business in this industry?
Yeah, so you know, when I started dyeing yarn, like it's the same trajectory that everybody's on, you know, like I would post stuff and you know, I didn't make a lot of sales sort of in the beginning, but it was sort of like, you know, I've come a long way since I first started the business. And for me, like giving back to the queer community was like never really like an option. It was like always like a necessity. Like I really feel
Mm,
the need to give back.
absolutely.
And I think that with a lot of just like the world's political climate right now, like we as a community just are, you know, among many other groups are just under attack. And I think that like, you know, as my following grew and as my business like developed and as I was like, you know, having more of a platform and maybe like bit of a louder voice than other people, like
Mhm.
I was like, well, this is just like something that I need to do, you know? And so I started my first fundraiser, my first Pride fundraiser. I do it every June.
Yes.
I started that in like 2020 was the first year and I did like you know, I made like $4,000 or $5,000 to donate. And then
Wow.
like this year or last year we donated I think uh like like $10,000.
Wow.
And then this
That's
year, like
awesome.
even
Thank
this year,
you.
like it's not even our Pride fundraiser, but I did do um I did a raffle. I got a bunch of yarn dyers together to support like the Trans Education Network of Texas because of
Mhm.
all the legislature going on down there, and we raised over $11,000
Yeah.
to donate to that org. So
Wow.
this year, I'm hoping to donate more than $20,000 to like LGBTQ charities, like with
Amazing.
the
Yeah.
Pride, yeah, with the Pride
Yeah.
fundraiser in June.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and I love that. Like you know, whenever I have the chance to speak up, I guess like I try to.
Yeah. And I know that it takes a real balance of finding that confidence of like, you know, when do I speak up? How do I say what's authentic in my frame for me, but you know, not making anyone else feel like they're unsafe. And I do feel like a lot of people in the knit and crochet industry struggle with it. I mean, I know, you know, like you said, so many different groups and dynamics of people are under attack, but there have been times where I've had real fear, like as a Black woman, to speak out on Black issues. And, you know, it's just like, I don't, it's hard finding a balance of
Yeah.
like, how do, and what I'm trying to say, is it coming across in a way that's not making other people feel unsafe, where at the same time, I'm not silencing myself, I'm not allowing myself to be gaslit. And I also don't feel, just as an individual, you know, business owner, that that I'm not focusing on business, and like just trying to find, that balance. I mean, I don't know if you find that dynamic interesting or hard as well, because you're trying to speak for yourself, but also speak to a wide range of other people who may or may not
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from.
I think when I think that when we're talking about like showing up as your authentic self and being able to like vocalize about issues that affect you and that you
Yeah.
really care about and are really passionate about, there's sort of like this sense of fear because everybody fears rejection and
Mhm.
hateful comments, like unnecessary like gatekeeping by other people, like those are forms of rejection, but like, and I'm only speaking for myself, but like I guess I find that the more you speak up and show your authentic voice and like what you really feel true to, the it's like exercising a muscle. It gets easier every time you do it because what happens is
Mm.
you'll always be surprised how much people like aren't going to buck back until
Mm.
you speak up and people show support, right?
Yeah.
But and again, I'm just speaking for myself because I see the hate I've seen the hate in this, in not just this space, but in other spaces too. And
Sure. Yeah.
it's different for everyone. But I find that like the more you stay true to your compass and the more you speak up and the more you exercise that muscle, the negativity, like the people who objected or oppose it, they'll fade away on their own.
Mm.
And
Mm.
you really start to begin to foster a space for other people to be like, okay, well, this is someone who shares values with me, and like this is someone who can speak up maybe on issues that maybe I'm not ready to speak up on, et
That
cetera,
part.
et cetera.
Yeah.
But like it's like dropping, it's like dropping a match in like a field of really dry grass. Like eventually all of the grass is going to catch on fire. So sometimes just by
Mm.
saying the
I love
smallest
that.
things that you believe in, like
Mhm.
people are motivated to be like, well, hell yeah, I can speak up too, because this is
Oh yeah.
unjust. And suddenly you're creating a community in which we're all on the same page.
Mhm.
Like we're not tolerating problematic behavior. We're not tolerating folks who are quiet all the time. And you start to notice the people who are quiet,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And it speaks volumes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the silence is literally deafening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that I was definitely of the mindset like, okay, I'm a business and I need to appeal to every single customer. But at the end of the day, the truth is that like I don't want your sales if you don't support my existence,
Mm.
right?
Wow. That's powerful.
I
Yeah.
mean, isn't it the truth? It's like
It's absolutely the truth. And
yeah,
I've seen it in how you engage, how you showcase your business, how you run your business, how you engage with, your audience, customers or not, like, even just people who follow you because, they like you and they enjoy seeing what you're making and creating. And that is absolutely 100%. Like, I think that is such an important part of it. It hits the nail on the head because, like I said, I've seen it, especially with Black makers. Like obviously there are Black makers in the industry, but, I would say to a certain extent, there's not a lot of us. And when you can see another Black maker who can confidently stand up and speak their mind on an issue and create engagement and set standards, and even if it is people involved in the conversation who disagree, like at least there's conversation and like there is communication happening there. And whether you're for or against what that person is saying, especially like if you're for it, I have just felt so seen at times, just because someone who looks like me and who I know understands, because if they're a Black woman, I know they've understood the issues and the ups and downs of being a Black woman. And even more so if they're a Black woman who knits or crochets or dyes yarn or does weaving or whatever, when they can speak out and say things, I'm just like over here snapping all day. And like
yeah,
it feels good and you feel seen. Like you said, you feel seen. And anyone who's trying to make you not feel seen, or if you feel unseen up to that point, because you're afraid that somebody's not going to hear you, it makes you feel heard and it makes you feel valued. And I think it's so important. So
Yeah, there's something to be said about just like fostering a space that's inclusive, but also allows for dialogue. Like,
yeah,
there are followers of mine who do not see eye to eye with me on things, but they stick around because we still, at the end of the day, respect each other's opinions and existence. You know what I mean? Like, I keep coming
yeah,
back to this word existence, but it's like,
yeah.
it's like I'm not playing games about like, like people invalidating someone's entire existence. Like, it's just like nobody has time for that hate in the online space. But I think there are folks also who, hear me say stuff and have connected with me in this other way. And then they're like, well, I don't really understand that, but maybe my mind is opening a little bit to like
Mhm.
trying to understand it, because I feel like this person is like, someone who I've agreed with before. Like, I don't know, but and it's
Oh, that
different for
makes
every.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said about having cognizant recognition of your existence. Because when people are just arguing for the sake of arguing, or like you said, not saying anything at all. Like, I remember speaking about that so much in 2020 when a lot of issues were going on in the world. It's just like, you have nothing to say. Like,
Yeah.
that just makes me feel so devalued. And I don't know how you can make someone feel any more silenced if I'm coming to you and, saying like, you make me feel hurt. You're stepping on my toes. You make me feel like I'm not valued, or even worse, like you said, like my existence, like my mere existence doesn't matter. And you've got
Yeah.
nothing to say to that. It's just like gut punch.
Yeah.
Gut punch.
Yeah, and I don't, in the space, like, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on a lot of stuff, but I'm, like, I'm just asking people, like, actively try to put in the work to understand social issues that don't affect you, because we, like, none of us are going to survive if, we don't start
Don't.
changing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're doomed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, there are things like, and a good example is like, there have been times when, like, I've seen other makers speak up about something, an attitude maybe towards like the queer community, and kind of
Mhm.
speak up on like on a negative experience they had, and it's almost like, oh my God, I've had that experience too, but I wasn't connecting the dots. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it's like when people share their stories, like, listen, because, sometimes, like, just because it was in a different setting doesn't mean it wasn't the same exact thing that happened to me, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think it's really beautiful in a way, because we do have this like, connectivity through craft, through fiber. It's almost, a blessing in a way, even if we're talking about issues that, at the end of the day, some of us can be, I hate to use the word like ignorant, but I know when it comes to, LGBTQ issues, that there was so much where I mean, I was ignorant. I didn't know. And you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But and that can be okay to a certain extent. I don't know, because I don't know. But if you're not willing to learn from someone who does know and who has lived that, and they can educate you, then like,
Yeah.
we're doomed. And sometimes people want to, close their ears and close their eyes to that, because it's almost like you have this visceral gut reaction to, have to acknowledge that there's something that, oh my God, you don't know. Like, you
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
everything. And I think sometimes as humans, that's really, really hard. But, you know, it's, I think also at the same time, just like this beauty to it, because so many people are willing to sit down at the table and listen, literally, and listen to you, because, hey, I feel safe because I love fiber. Jake loves fiber, or
Yeah.
I know that like Jake has such dedication to his business, and it takes real courage. It takes a good amount of courage to put those topics and conversations on your business platform, because so many people are like, things that don't talk about, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
those top things that people feel like you can't talk about. So I know that it it takes balls to put yourself out there on the platform, even to share your experience. Like, I don't know if it's been like that for you, but again, like I said, for me, just sharing my experience, it is
Yeah.
scary.
I mean, yeah, and I'm at a point where, yeah, it is scary, but at the same time, um it's sort of like I know I did the right thing. I
Mhm.
mean, there have been times where I have turned down business because I don't share the same ethos or morals or empathy that another business does that wants to work with me, and I've seen that, and I have turned business down because I guess it's like I don't really feel willing to compromise on how I just believe that every person should be treated, you
Mm,
know?
mm.
If it's 2022 and I'm getting emails from, a yarn shop that has a problematic name of their yarn shop, I mean,
Yeah.
I, I'm not willing to, I'm not going to do business there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
And for you, as your advice to, fellow business owners and people who are even trying to get their business off the ground, because that's a core value of OML. I really want to, hopefully we have, but I really want to create a space for people who are like, I'm at A, I'm trying to get to B. How'd you get to B? So, like, what would you say to a person that's like trying to grapple that and figure out, like, what is my voice, what is my core value, and how do I weave that in to how I run my business? Because you seem definitely like how you have a good handle on it. Has it always been that way? And what would you say to someone who is at the most unsure or apprehensive about figuring out how to weave that into their business?
I would just, yeah, I think that it is definitely something that you grow into and you learn as you start to exercise your voice. But again, like I think it kind of like I guess my best advice of like trying to get to a spot where you're comfortable about sharing your I'm using the word ethos because I guess it kind of like as a business kind of like in companies like their
Sure.
their mission values or
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
like, so when I think about someone who is like trying to develop like a stronger sense of like what their core values are for their business and make those transparent, like the really like I just say like keep exercising it in small amounts, like show up. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable to change, and
Mhm.
I think that paying attention to like certain folks' reactions is
Mhm.
also important too. You know what I mean? Like listen to people when they do speak and listen to people when they don't speak, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I'm gonna play devil's advocate with you a little bit and ask you, maybe more so from like a customer standpoint. Like, if I'm a customer and I like the product or I like the service or whatever, but I don't necessarily care about what the core values are, or know about what the core values are, you know, does that mean that I can't be a customer of that business? Should it mean that I shouldn't be a customer of that business? Or at the end of the day, is it that customer's, is it their choice?
Yeah, I think that that's completely their prerogative. You know what I mean? Like I, you know, yeah, I would say that that is the customer's prerogative, right? But I think at the end of the day, people buy from people who they connect with and brands that they connect with for a
Mm,
lot of different reasons.
mm,
Like
mm.
I follow hundreds of businesses and I stick around and buy from them because I appreciate them. Some I follow for their humor, others I follow for their transparency. Some people I follow for their work ethic, like we
Yeah.
all we all fall within a certain space and everyone's like all the space, like the space that everyone takes up is valid and special. And that's like the cool thing. But when it comes to like being a customer, it's like, if I said something that offended you that bad, then maybe you might not want to shop with me, but if you want to shop with me, then that's fine. Because at the end of the day, there are people who might not agree with me, but they're willing to have the discussion and respect that I'm vocal about my opinion. And those are the people that are great too. We can't knock anybody down who's actually like willing to like hear something, think about it and respond, if they're not, and if they're not causing harm. Obviously that's the key piece to this.
Important.
Like if they're not causing harm, like we can still share different beliefs and still exist in a space. And I think that everybody always wants to operate like within a binary on every issue. You're either this or this, but like, it's like we can't neglect like nuance and context and history and trauma. And it's like all this stuff. It's like, on the internet space, you're only seeing this much of me, right? You're not really seeing the whole
else.
picture, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes during those moments where you feel like, somebody is like, if you feel like someone's being really like aggressive in a space, like, it's easy to say that like an aggressive meaning, like really passionate about something in a space. Like it's easy to say like, oh, that person's like kind of wild. But the truth is that like, no, that person's operating from a space that we don't know about.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And it leads me to another question, because I've heard different takes on this. Do you even feel that it's necessary to have a presence on social media, knowing where a lot of this engagement and conversation, like from an online standpoint, is happening? Do you feel it's necessary sometimes or at all for, if you have a pattern design shop or just a presence as a maker, even if you're using another third-party platform to share or whatever, do you really think that it is inherent to a certain degree or at all to have presence on social media to be able to, like you said, communicate that ethos of your brand? Or do you feel like in 2022, it's not necessary?
I mean, I think that I have a duty to show up and make my core values known to people. But I think that there's like this interesting shift in, like when we were younger, like our parents' generation, right? Like I'm 30, so my parents are, when my parents were growing up, like sure, they could have owned a small business, but first of all, likely it would have been a brick and mortar, right?
Yep.
So, but if we're really thinking about, let's think about a brick and mortar with no social media experience. Why do people keep coming back to that brick and mortar? Because they feel seen, they feel welcomed, they feel safe. So why is that different than the space that I'm creating on Instagram? All we're doing is reinventing new tricks. Like it's the same respect that you have with a business and the same like trust in a business that keeps you coming back to that business and the quality of the product, right? But I think that like, I think that we're just shifting to more online retail, and unfortunately, when it comes to small business, like, in larger businesses, you can hide behind hundreds of people before you get to the person that started the business, and you can hide behind large campaigns and flashy stuff. But in small business, the rules are different. It's like apples and oranges. In small business, it's like, you're not buying a product from me and I'm like traveling to space on that dime. Like you're buying, when you buy my skeins of yarn, like you literally help me put gas in my car and help me buy my next burner for my yarn. Like you help me buy a new table for my workshop to work on. Like, and and people who are in different situations than me, you're paying for their kids' baseball lessons or their dance lessons. And it's like, so I guess there's kind of like that foray into like, shopping big versus shopping small. But when you shop small, like, I think that it's hard. You can't really flesh out the business from the owner. Right.
Yeah.
like the product from the owner. I
Oh,
don't think
yeah.
that's really possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's really interesting, because it's like a wild, wild west, and online and social media platforms, and everybody has something to say. Everybody has so much opinion. If there's something that's like, Oscar level, people have like, so many people have like opinions in it, and it's, I found it just, yeah, I would say I found it hard at times to just like figure out like, okay, like what am I doing? Like what am I doing and what am I saying? It's like when you think you have like one hat good to go, and it's like, okay, I've learned how to do like a gauge swatch and sample, and I've learned how to, like you said, make this knitting pattern that really takes a little bit more, forethought to something else that may be a little bit more like meditative. Like you said, like sometimes differences between like crochet and knitting, because I get what you're saying. I'm just like, let me just like single crochet all day.
Yeah.
I'm a slow crocheter too, so I like knit slow and crochet slow, but I just feel like I'm exercising like brain power a lot with knitting. But it's just like the moment I feel like I've got it down, like, okay, I know how to like knit a sweater now, and I know how to run my website and like put my listings up, it's like, oh, okay, well, now I've got to figure out how to navigate like telling people about me and my core values and my mission statement. And
It's like
difficult.
being vulnerable is hard.
Yeah.
Like that's like the literal human experience. Being
Mhm.
vulnerable is hard. So when you start a business, you always feel vulnerable. I still feel vulnerable every time I put yarn in the shop. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily ever going to go away, but I trust that I've stuck to my guns, and stuck to my core values, and like the rest is like, you know, I mean, in some regard out of my control. And
Yeah. And maybe it's
but
just a learning experience. Like you said, things are
yeah.
always changing. Like, what would you say? Because obviously so much has changed in the world. It seems like the world is constantly ever changing, like really like up and down almost every 6 months now. It's just like, is the world speeding up and moving faster? But definitely there's been a lot of change through the global pandemic. And like you said, with knowing that there are so many differences and nuances between running a big business and a big brand and small. What things have you learned in the last 2 years, good or bad, and running your hand dyed business in the last 2 years that you think have, what lessons have you learned? I don't want to say that have made you a better business owner or not, but what things have you learned that you would share with others that you think would be instrumental to take away with all that's happened in the world in the last 2 years?
I would say, first, I just might say that like one thing that everyone needs to know going to business is that like change and growth are hard. Like they're just hard. And you're going to be, when you first start a business, like you might have the, you know, the best laid plans in the world, but it would be surprising if they all went according to plan. Like if everything went according to plan, I would be hard pressed to think that that's anybody's experience, because there's always something to, but I think that like the pandemic, like for me, like the pandemic catapulted, like after I got COVID, the pandemic catapulted me into the mindset that was like, life is too short to do something that you're not completely obsessed with and in love with. And if you have the opportunity to run with it, run with it. And, like, you
Love
know,
that.
yeah, and before we got on this call, we were talking about it too, just sort of like about like, you know, running a business is not easy. There's parts of running a business that I didn't even think about until having to think about them. And, those are things that you kind of just learn in the moment, and there are always going to be growing pains. But, you know, coming now, like it's interesting because like the pandemic took my business and my attitude about my business to the next level in
Mm.
regards to like really just like, I think I have a chance to follow my dream of doing this. So like, I really need to do it. But then I think that on the other side of that, as we like traverse like out of out of the pandemic, I
Yeah.
mean, we're absolutely still in the pandemic, but
Yeah.
I mean, like as we traverse like into, it's not so much that we're out of a pandemic, it's just that people are acquiescing to just living like,
It's like a phase 5 plus. Like that's how I feel like Chicago is like fully open plus.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but I also think, yeah, and I also think that like for me, like it's also taught me that um the importance of like, I guess like in this phase, it's kind of, it's been a lesson of like, okay, I just put the car into drive and I was going 120 miles per hour down the highway of running a business.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, I can't maintain that speed. I have to stop for gas. And I feel like every business owner kind of jumps in and you need that fire. Like you need to be prepared for that fire because
Mm.
you're going to be overcoming challenges. You're going to have to get crafty. You're going to have some late nights, but at the same time is that like you also need to take care of yourself or your business will explode
Wow.
because you're a small business. Remember, I don't request my earned time off. Like I don't request 14 days off to
Yeah.
go to Barbados. Like
Yeah.
I say, okay, Jake, every 3 months, I need to take 4 days off. Or maybe Fridays I work half days. And that's something that I started doing the past few months. Like I've started
Love that.
taking Fridays half
Love that.
days because like I
Mhm.
can get what I need to get done. Like I do like admin work and stuff. And like it's about finding that balance. But it's like if you're on the fence about starting your own business, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that what you what you might think your business is going to look like may not actually be what uh, ends up happening. Do you know what I mean? Like growth is like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, growth is just like constant. So yeah, for me, like from 2020 to 2022, it's been like speeding way up and then like slowing way down. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Trying
It-
not to hit the wall at the same time.
yeah, but yeah, and you also just honestly like you can't learn lessons until you learn them. And
Yeah.
there's been a lot of lessons learned, even as far as like how not to overextend myself, the capacity of my own physical health, the capacity of my own mental health. And like those are things that like when you're making up a business plan, you're not like, okay, 4 mental health days will cost me. It's no one's
Yeah.
putting that in a
Not a
business
thing.
plan. Right. So it's
Yeah.
like, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's like when you're the only one running your business, like somebody's got to look out for the boss.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah. I totally hear you. And I think that is a great lesson learned. And yeah, I think, like you said, change and growth are hard. And the interesting thing is, like, I think for some of us in our minds, with this, like you said, phase of like, we're back open again. It's like, I don't know, sometimes I grapple, I'm like almost waiting like for my 2019 self to come back. And I don't think she's coming back. Like,
Yeah.
as to how I run my businesses, like I remember at the beginning of this year, like knowing that our OML Portland event, like we restarted that. So we're like back on and, I feel like July 23rd is going to be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
But that our OML Portland event was supposed to happen in 2020. And I kind of just had this expectation, like almost giving myself permission to have self-care and to have mental health days throughout the pandemic, because I'm like, when this is over, baby, I am back. I am live and in charge. Like you said, I'm like pedal to the metal again. And I can't say that has happened as a business owner at the speed or level or dynamic that I thought that it was going to happen. And I'm like, I don't know, did I get like super used to like self-care and like paying attention to myself and taking things slow, or is it still some type of fatigue that's still ever going? Because like you said, it's not over. Like it's not like it just ended. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really interesting that you say that because like I've talked about that too with friends and family and stuff. And it's like, you're almost like mourning
Mm,
this like other version of your life. But the truth is that we're all experiencing this together. And that's like, I feel like that's like a big like dissonance between people. Like when we talk about this pandemic in general, it's that like, no, like, what are you not understanding? Like, we're kind of like all going through this together. And that's
absolutely.
the mentality that we need to have. But
Mm,
you're right. It's like before the pandemic, I was working a full-time job at the hospital, and then I would leave the hospital and work full-time at Kenyarn. But after 2 years of doing that, like it's not it's not possible. It's not something that I can maintain,
mm,
right? And it's not
mhm.
something that anybody can maintain. So like honestly, like we're in a world that hates when people relax, hates when people get vacation, hates compensating people for so that they can have mental health for themselves. So
Yes,
it's like
yes,
when you have the chance to like, when you have the chance to not overextend yourself and just like relax, take it.
take
Like,
it. Yeah,
we the funny thing about like, we're on the Our Maker Life podcast and we're talking about all of these issues like within the fiber community.
yeah.
And I think that like the interesting thing is that like during the pandemic, like our crafting community changed in a lot of ways because we couldn't do like in-person events. But
Mhm.
the other component to that was that like it also gave people a lot more like a lot like it was like people were doing a lot more like online shopping like in a retail space because they were
Mhm.
looking to sort of like rest and do that sort of stuff. But it almost feels like that speed in which people were like kind of like coming to these online spaces to shop and stuff, like it hasn't it doesn't feel like it's slowed down a lot.
Mm,
But it's like I'm just speaking for myself, but like I
sure.
needed it to slow down. So like
Mm,
in the past few
yeah,
months, like I've kind of like been like, okay, I think I just really want to do stuff that sort of fills my cup and fills my bucket,
yeah.
and not really feel the pressures of other folks kind of operating from a survival standpoint. And like and that's like maybe I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say like that. I mean, like it's if folks are operating from a survival standpoint, then like I'm obviously speaking from a place of privilege, but I
Mm.
also like I operate my business true. Some days it does feel like a survival
Oh,
standpoint.
certainly, yeah. Like you said,
Yeah.
you have your own specific parameters of like what survival is for you. Absolutely. And like
Yeah.
you
And
said,
so
we're
I
all in this together. We're all experiencing this, and we may have different perceptions of how we're experiencing that, but absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I just think that like, I think that with just like and in the way that the world operates right now and like, the dreaded word like capitalism, it's like I guess I try to keep that I've been like more actively trying to keep that like any like essence of that away from Kenyarn. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm,
this year I truly have been like I've planned we're doing our crochet along now, but I'm
love
planning a
it.
mystery make along next month. And then I'm planning a book club knit along for the end of like for a little later in the year because
Love that.
I have like just been like, it's okay to like talk the talk, but like when it comes to slowing down, I have to walk the walk. And my way of slowing down is really just saying, look at all the yarn that we have and like look at all of the supplies that we have and like
Mm.
let's enjoy it together as a community. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So I've been
yeah.
trying to just create opportunities for people to feel really like comfortable and relaxed in a space where they can just like be themselves and not have to be in person, because a lot of us are also fighting the battle of like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not ready to go back in
Oh
person.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
so like all these bigger events that are being hosted, it's like, do I have FOMO sometimes? Like sure, but at the same time it's like we just have to respect each other's like comfort levels. And for me
Mhm.
it's like I don't want to exclude anyone. So I want to create those like online spaces where people can come and just kind of hang,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why this year I've just been doing more make-alongs,
Yeah.
you know?
Like I love that. And I think what I hear you're saying too is that a lot of people really leaned into and depended on things that were available to them online throughout the pandemic, because everything in the real world like stopped. And now that things are opening back up, people are sort of, figuring out what still works for them. Like,
Yeah.
do those spaces that are just online work for me? Or should I be having FOMO about like not going back to, the in-person events? And what I'm learning, as a co-founder of OML, is that we can all give each other grace and respect each other, because I have felt a lot of pressure knowing at the speed and just like the movement of how OML felt, before the pandemic, and then going to like where we're pausing events. So we're like going from 100 to 0 for 2 years. Even the expectation that you put on yourself as like a business owner and an event host, it's like, well, I'm trying to figure out, what do you guys want too? Because like, I don't want to, like you said, make anyone feel pressured or not ready, or if they are ready, I just want to give people a good experience. So I think I'm giving myself grace. And I think that in our own individual like boxes of experiencing different things around this global issue, we should all be doing that. Like, if you're not ready, then don't go.
Yeah.
And if you want to do things online, don't make yourself feel guilty about that. Like, do that, cow, you know what I mean? Join that cow. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay. Like, you can totally do that. And I also think that I've learned to let some of the fear go of accepting that OML Portland 2022 may not look like, and doesn't have to look like, and probably won't look like how OML Calgary 2019 looked. And like,
Yeah.
that is totally okay. And I'm looking forward, and I'm excited to seeing like what an in-person event and a post global pandemic world looks like and feels like. And I'm also tying it back into everything like you were saying about brand, something and core values. We've started to implement and integrate like things that are intentional into our core values. So everything doesn't have to be like this big, fast, joyride. Like, it can have those aspects, but also it can be smooth and chill and calm,
Yeah.
and really like authentic and intentionality weaved in throughout the event. So whether that's through like really like, highlighting a set number of makers instead of just a free for all of highlighting small business makers, like maybe we can highlight, Kenyarn, and really tell that story and really flesh that out. And it's more than just a business card in a bag. And, if it does feel smaller as far as like attendees or whatever that is, it's like, I'm looking forward to seeing what that's going to feel like. And I'm giving myself grace to be okay that if it looks different from any other year, like, that's okay. Because that actually in a way was what OML was before.
Yeah.
Like, the events always looked a little bit different from year to year. So
Yeah. It's like, it's if I think in like a larger, like in a larger view of things, it's kind of like we as we as a society, like everybody, like we have endured some of the most horrifying things in the past 2 years. And we have all changed, as much as we don't want to say, and as much as people are trying to just be like, nothing's changed, nothing's changed. Everything has changed. So like,
yeah.
it's like, there are some people who are really excited that things are kind of going back into like in person, and that's great for them. And that, but then there are other people who might be more reserved. But the thing is that like, it's just it's unrealistic as a business owner, or as someone who's like working within a business, to feel like shame about changing your speed. Like, when
Oof.
you drive a car, you don't drive at 50 miles per hour the whole ride. You would crash into stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what it's saying. It's just like honor like the fact that if you need to slow down, you can slow down. People, and if people leave who aren't okay with you slowing down, then they were there for the wrong reasons.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to say that like, everybody can change their speed, and we don't need to feel guilt about changing our speed. And we, no one's had it easy. There's not
Yeah.
a single person who's had it easy.
Not a single person's had it easy. And it's, I think, such a great lesson, whether you are running, in-person events, or, have an online shop, or you're a pattern designer that runs through, like I said, other platforms like Ravelry or Etsy, to just acknowledge that it's like, I keep hearing the word pivot for myself for 2022. Like,
Yeah.
pivot, and like it's okay. It's okay. Like, if whatever that means to you. So if you're pivoting where you're slowing things down, or you're pivoting because you're figuring out that your values are changing, or you're pivoting because you're realizing like it's not just about selling a product, it's also about listening to what people's values are in conversations in their ethos, and it's about having organic conversations, or you're pivoting to have more things that speak to maybe what your people want, like how you're doing active things. You're not just saying, okay, well, I'm not really sure what's going on in the online space now that things are opening back up, so I'm just going to sit over here and like brood and feel sorry for myself. You're like, no, let's do a crochet along and like chat it up, you know what I mean? And like put things, you're implementing things into your business that speaks to what the world and within, the larger world and within our industry may want, because somebody out there wants it. And that's such a core integral part of running a business, of realizing like it may not be for everybody, but if you're willing to pivot, you can find something for someone. And I'm learning that by having, our July event jump started again. But, we have things in the work where we want to speak to intimacy too, and like slow. Like if the 250 person event isn't your thing, that's not your jam, or you're not ready for that yet, then, we want to have some other things during the year where it's like, maybe it's 25 or 30 of us, maybe it's a 15-person knit night, and really speak to that and be able to realize that like that's okay if we pivot, and like incorporate that into your brand. So I think it's such good advice of realizing, with just based around things that have happened over the last 2 years, that like you said, change and growth, it's scary and it's freaking hard, but it's integral, and it's beautiful at the end of the day. And it can only make, I think you would say this too, it can only make your business and your brand better.
Yeah. 2022 for me is like the year of putting the slow back in slow fashion. Like,
Woo.
putting it, it's the truth.
Love
It's
it.
like,
Yeah.
nothing as a yarn dyer, nothing you do is fast. You know what I mean? You know how many steps there are to dye yarn?
It took
So
me
it's
3
like,
months to make this.
yeah. So for me, it's like, I'm used to doing things pretty slowly and pretty methodically. So it's like, but this year it's like, I want more community. I want to slow down. I want everybody to heal from the past 2 years, and like, like not feel like, why do we need to jump back into versions of ourselves that the world no longer supports? The world no longer supports the speed at which we were operating. So why are we trying, like, why is everybody trying to jump back to it? And it goes what you just said. We're pivoting and we're doing things for ourselves. But yeah,
we're being okay with that. Give yourself grace. If you're at a point in your business where you're like, do I go back to 2019 or do I like try to figure something else out? Like, give yourself grace to like be in 2022. Like that's okay. Just because like you said, like so much in the world, and at least here, I'm speaking for here in my city in Chicago, like we're fully, like things are cranking, baby, like it's back open, but it absolutely oddly still looks different. Like it doesn't even like feel like 2019 Chicago. It just doesn't. And things are like fully back open. There's just a new vibe to it. And that's even in corporate America. Like, I've seen tons of businesses, like they're not requiring employees, to be there 5 days a week. Like the whole like 40-hour full-time in the office thing is kind of like, for many businesses, like that's gone, honey. Like we're pivoting, like come in here 2 days a week when it works for you. And like, that's where we are. Or like, shops are like, sorry, like you said, I'm as a business owner of this coffee shop, I'm no longer open on like Thursdays and Fridays, because those are like my days. And I'm okay with that. Like you can't come here 7 days a week anymore. And so the city, it feels different. And it's like, it's beautiful in a way, you know, it's scary, but it's also really nice to see. And I love to hear that that's being reflected in small business too. And like you said, it kind of has to, it has to.
Yeah, we as knitters and crocheters, like, you know, like we can look back and like at, you know, I feel like as at, even at the history of craft, and like we've always sort of been revolting in our own way against the way that the world is moving. And
Yes.
I think that right now it's like now's not the time to forget that. You know, like we're gonna get we're being, you know, in a way I feel like the government and maybe like, you know, is kind of gently being like, you got to get back to normal. But
Back in
I
there.
don't I
Yeah.
don't really subscribe to that. Like I'm just
Same.
sort of yeah.
Same. I have learned, I have, because of tuning into myself so much in the last 2 years, because of having to, because of the parameters of what the government is saying, I've now learned to have a voice for myself. And so it's like when those same guidelines are like, now you're telling me to switch again based on what you think this world should be like, I'm like, hey, I'm going to speak up for myself as an individual though, because what work and business has looked like for me over the last 2 years is different. So
Yeah.
like I get a piece in this conversation. Like I get to pull up a chair and it's no longer like you telling me. I think a lot of people are like speaking up and at the minimum saying like, hey, let me give you like a challenge to that, or, you know, I've got something to say, and like, and we can try to find a negotiation, because I'm not throwing away myself. And so many people, I think, are just acknowledging that and hopefully being able to find their voice while I think I want to name this podcast episode, putting this slow back in slow fashion, because in so many ways, like everything that you've talked about, it speaks to that. And it's our core. Like you said, it speaks so much to what knitting and crocheting and yarn dyeing is. I think
Yeah.
before we were really trying to push like, golly, the world is moving so fast. And, you know, you have so many aspects of fast when it comes to business and commerce. And, you know, I feel like sometimes like going against the grain, like that's ironically what the OML events were like, come to a place where you can chill and hang out and like get away from your daily fast, like rut of life that you go through 364 other days of the year. And, you know, now we have a chance to really lean into that because the world has reflected that slow for so long.
Yeah. I think it used to be cool to be like, I mean, it used to literally be a part of my brand. Like I was like working a full-time job, running a business at night. And it was like, wow, the hustle is really cool. But like that's just another example of how my brand has changed. Cause now
Yeah.
I'm like, everybody needs to slow down a bit, like, you know, because things are not the
Yeah.
same. And like, you know,
Yeah.
being a hustler, like doing the hustle is like not, it's not just what it used to be,
Not what
you know,
yeah. It's
it
not
doesn't
giving what
hold.
it's supposed to give like it used to. Not for me, not in my
Yeah.
opinion. I agree with you. It's
Yeah.
not giving what it's supposed to give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I love
yeah,
that. Like, yeah, what were we gonna say?
no,
Oh,
I was gonna
yeah.
let you.
Okay. I mean, I feel like you have given so many like gems and great valuable pieces of advice that I really really hope helps, you know, small business and designers and people who are just trying to, like you said, like make a way for themselves where they can, you know, have someone support what they're passionate about and what they love, where they can really take care of themselves. And at the end of the day, I think that is also what it's all about. We're all just out here like trying to take care of ourselves, and knowing how sensitive and important that is, because there are larger, you know, powers at play that can take away that in an instant, like your whole world. And we've seen that, we're seeing that like in an instant you can be in your home, in the next second, you know, things are changing where you have to leave your home, and or you're trying to run away and you can't get out, you know, all these different angles that we've seen in the world happening. You know, I'm speaking in regards to, you know, Ukraine, and you know, it has just put so much insight to me to reflect back in myself and find gratitude that, hey, you know, it's almost a blessing in many ways to be able
It's
to
a
like,
privilege that you
it's a
can slow
privilege.
down. Yeah, that you have the option
That part.
to slow down and make a sweater. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. and
I feel
figure out
that.
how I can pivot and like run my business, because for many people that is not what they're getting the opportunity right now to wake up in the morning and think about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it definitely offers perspective. While you're running your business and doing all of these great things, how is Jake loving on Jake when it comes to fiber? What things are you working on? What projects are you hard eyeing? Any makers out there that you're totally like following and liking every post? Because I know I have mine.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, so I feel like, yeah, so many, first of all. But I think right now, like during the holidays, um I knit myself. I made this like I made a promise to myself to take between Christmas and New Year's off.
Love
And
it.
so I took that whole time off, but what I also did was like obviously like there's still a part of my brain that's a little cuckoo, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to knit a shawl in that amount of time in fingering weight." And I did it, and it was so, but it was just so rewarding that like it just for a week or however long that period is, like it was just sort of like me in the shawl, and it was my thing that I did every day. I just woke up and worked on the shawl,
Love that.
and I actually knit that in a yarn company called Spun Right Round.
Mm,
Amazing speckled yarn, variegated yarn. Love her. She's in upstate New York. Absolutely love it.
okay.
Um,
We'll
but
share a link in like the notes and stuff so people can go check it out.
yeah, I mean, but outside of that, like other dyers who I absolutely adore, Adela of Lola Bean Yarn Company. I love
Yes.
Ashley of Montana Crochet. There's so many people doing cool things right now. There's never a
Yeah.
shortage of creativity in the community. What do I want to knit right now? Well, I'm finishing my crochet along, and then I'm actually jumping into the knit collage knit along, because if you don't know, knit collage is a brand. They make amazing art yarn in like the most gorgeous hand spun fiber. It's all hand spun in India. It's absolutely amazing.
Love
Um,
it.
and
Yeah.
I've grown. I've actually really enjoyed like leaning into my work with them as a company. I think Amy, the owner of
He's
Knit
great.
Collage,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, she's such a light, and she honors a lot of the same stuff that I do. And I designed a shawl for them for their make along this year, based on your life path number and numerology, to kind of bring
It.
another level of mindfulness to knitting, because it
Mm,
forces you to think a little bit more about why you're knitting and what you're knitting. And you know and it's just a really fun concept. So I'm doing that. And yeah, and I have a book club this year that I'm
yes.
debuting, that's like a knit along, like a little
Yeah, I love that.
scarf pattern that I'm writing up right now. Like, but we're
Mhm.
gonna read a book, and then we're gonna get to a chance to like video chat with the author,
I love
which is
that.
so cool. I can't believe that she's on board. I like sent her, when you
I
like
love
send an
that.
yeah, I sent an email basically being like, she's never gonna respond, and then she did, and I was like, but yeah, it's cool. But
I love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
coming up for me, I think that I have, this in a few weeks, I mean, probably about like 2 weeks, I'll be re-releasing my astrology collection, but
Love it.
I revamped all the colorways so that they're only speckled. They're
Okay.
only everything is on a white base with speckles, so
So
that
no
and
semi-solids.
nope, no semi-solids, no pooling,
Okay.
no, but I'm using them for my astrologia shawl, and I actually brought on a mystery Tunisian crochet designer who is
Ooh,
working on the crochet version right now. So everybody's going to be able to get to join, and we're going to just like, do the thing. But
love that. And
yeah,
is your astrological shawl, is it worsted or DK? Is it
it's actually on Aaron. It's
it's on
on my
Aaron. Okay.
Foggy Aaron. And now that I have a new custom base as of this year, my Foggy Aaron base,
Yeah.
we're using the Foggy Aaron. And like, it works up so quick. It is so soft.
It's
It's
so
like,
soft. Yes.
yeah. And so we're gonna be using that. And I'm just, yeah, again, I'm ready to start creating projects and doing yarn. You know, indie dyers do a lot of like, we drop a collection and then we dye for months and we send them out. But for me, it's sort of like, okay, well, once it's out the door, I want to see the yarn getting worked up, and we do see some of
Mm.
that. But now, like by doing stuff like this, where we do like a yarn drop and then we do a make along, it's sort of like, well, folks can get their yarn, then we can all cast on together, and that's the experiences that I want to start creating, I guess. Yeah.
I love that. I think you have, and I know that you absolutely will continue. And I'm so excited. I will make sure that like you give me all the details so we can share about the book Knit Along, because I'm super excited about that. And yeah, I love that how you want to just keep that engagement going even after your yarn skeins are released, and stay engaged. And it just speaks so much to who you are as a person, and your brand and your business, and how it just continues to evolve and be great. So I'm so thankful to you that you decided to hang out with me here this morning on the podcast, and always for being like a forever OML supporter. You've helped us on both sides of the table.
Yeah.
And and it's just always a pleasure to see your growth and to hear your words and just see how you run as a business owner, because you are really killing it out here, and I'm sure being such an inspiration to myself and so many others. So thank you so much, Jake, for like being on. And I know where to find you because I stalk you online all the time, but where can people find you online and find your yarn and your shop and all of that?
So you can find me, my website is Kenyarn, KENYARN.com. And all of my social media handles are at is that Kenyarn. And yeah, so stay tuned for lots of fun things. Honestly, people are always asking like how they can like follow what I'm doing. And I always say, join my mailing list, because
Yes.
that's the most consistent communication. The link is in my bio, it's on my website, but that's always where I announce my fun stuff. So so that's where you get to be in the know about like if you want to join our book club, if you want to join our next make along, that's the place to do it.
Okay, love it. And I wish we had like another hour, because I would talk to you. I would just completely pivot and talk to you about newsletters and like marketing, digital marketing from that standpoint, because yeah, I think it's such a great tool. And I really think it's having like a great comeback in the last year or so for people to really be engaged with their audience and their customers. So definitely, I love that you shared that. And thank you so much again, Jake. It's always, always, always a pleasure. I hope to see you in July, but if not, like I said, I'm sure we'll be talking about like putting more slowness out in the world, and have you at some future OML meetups for sure.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.